Salutations, everyone. Welcome back to Victoria 3. I'm Lord Forwind, here with a requested guide for France. A lot of you want to go play as good Francais and be all French and play an interesting nation in that. And all I have to say is, have you even tried France in this game? France, right now, in Victoria 3, is arguably, in my opinion, the most simultaneously boring and interesting nation in the game. You have virtually no unique stuff going on. You have access to the Suez and Panama stuff, like most of the other Europeans do. You don't have any really unique events. You don't have any unique crises. You're just a sandbox nation, which is quite nice as France. Right now, you're rank 2. You easily can become rank 1 in the world. Military, you're probably one of the strongest, and you can stay that way. You've got good population, good economy, great education, and your industry's pretty well set up. And you have access to, right here, one of the best coal mine areas in the game. The downside is France is just uninteresting to a large degree, but you can kind of do whatever you like. So we'll get into this, and I'll break it down into several different sections, all chaptered below, so you can skip to what section you would like to see about France. So, the starting situation of France in 1863 is in decent shape. France is ranked 2, you've got a good economy, you've got a relatively stable government, you have a slight bureaucracy crisis that can be largely modified by building more government admin centers. Probably you're going to want to build them in like Paris, where you already have a level 14 to get that nice throughput bonus. Sadly, there is no Versailles. However, late game, you do have the ability to build the Eiffel Tower here, which is kind of cool. You get a ton of prestige, and that's it. No other bonus, basically. And so that's the French beginning there. You've got a good setup of your industries. Most of your provinces already have 1 or 2 industries in them. You might theoretically want to consolidate them because you've got several repeats of them scattered throughout your nations. But by and large, you're in decent shape. You can just improve where you are. Beware, you got a lot of textile mills. If you want to be ideal, get rid of the low ones, centralize them more. But otherwise, just leave it as is. The only thing you need to do as France really is work on building up your agriculture in some of your states, as well as your mining. Increase your wood as well. But you've got decent states. You've got modifiers, natural harbors. Build your fleet in Marseille. Outside of that, you've got some good soil up here for agriculture, meaning as France, you can actually be a bit of an agricultural power early on. Your tech is amazing. France is one of the better starting tech nations. You already have access to railroads. So you get tier 3 tech. You have access to skirmish infantry, meaning early on, outside of Prussia and Great Britain, you can pretty much whoop anybody in a war, making conquest as France very viable. In terms of society, you've already got egalitarianism and central archives and banking, meaning you can easily rush for quinine to get rid of malaria and even push even further on to somewhere like malaria prevention relatively quickly. The reality, though, is you're going to want to focus on production as France. It's super easy to become #1 great power in the world, but it's an amazing technological start. And you already have multiple universities and a good technology spread going, which is great. Now, on the other hand, your diplomatic situation is not entirely great. So before we get into that, though, be aware you do have unincorporated states throughout the world: French Guiana, northern Algeria, and Corsica. It might be worth at least incorporating Corsica, for example, or Algeria, just because they're part of France at this point. Be aware, though, it does cost you more bureaucracy. Outside of that, Great Britain hates you. Their antagonist. honestly, it's worth improving relations with them. They have a rivalry with you, but if you improve them enough, you can break the rivalry, meaning they actually no longer hate you anymore, which is great because they are probably the nation most likely to intervene in wars against you. And you're going to want a lot of wars as France. If you want to play France that way, you can totally just turtle in Europe and play just France, colonize a bit in Africa, and you can be number one nation. But if you want to have fun and you want to make a nation that's pretty uninteresting, more dynamic, you're going to want wars. So if we look at the French army, you have 260 battalions. If we look at most of the other great powers, obviously outside of Austria and Russia and the Chinese, you're probably the strongest nation in the game. They're kind of stuck, at least on Austria, Russia is, and the Chinese on peasant armies, irregulars. Austria, on the other hand, slightly more professional. Just avoid fighting them. They don't hate you at this point. Improve relations. You can honestly probably get a diplomatic pact with them. And that secures Europe. But France's army allows you to beat people. Nations like Spain here, which is unbalanced, poor diplomacy, only got 2 puppets and a small army, are ripe for the taking. If you want to fight in Europe, it's quite viable to invade France and Portugal, or even invade Italy. Switzerland's a bit of an odd one. I find people tend to really dislike you if you invade Switzerland. I don't know why. Maybe it's hard-coded. Belgium is easily conquerable or integratable, and then the Netherlands and everywhere else. Be aware Prussia is a threat, though. They're not as big of a threat to you at the early game as Austria is, but they have equivalent military tech to you. So you're not going to beat them through technology. If you want to beat them through technology, you got to focus military, where given time, your technological advantages and inherent strengths as France can overcome Prussia's army. But where you want to think about invading as France is Asia and Africa. Technically, you could go for South Africa. France, at the beginning of the game, has 2 colonies already running in Africa, and unfortunately, at the beginning of the game, you're still crippled by malaria, meaning getting quinine, getting rid of malaria. Pretty useful as France early on, because you've already started to colonize. You've already got a decent colonial institution going. Once you fix your bureaucracy, you can improve it further. The downside is you're never going to be able to match Great Britain in terms of colonizing efficiency, so you got to prioritize. Sahrawi up here, if you can, almost start of the game, go through and set up every single one of these colonies. Even if you just get one province, it's still worth it. Once you get malaria and fix your institutions, you can very rapidly colonize this area. If you want to be slightly more efficient, so more than I just did there, cancel the colonies that I just set up, obviously. Leave the ones that you already have. I think we already colonized one there. Oh, whatever. Focus on the Sahrawi and South Cameroon. Declare an interest in these areas if you haven't already done so. And start colonizing. You'll colonize quickly. This is great for rubber. This is just free land. The other thing is, there's really no one in this area you can't conquer. Be aware that Liberia and Sierra Leone are being protected. I think there's one other here. Great Britain owns this area. And outside of that, there's a little bit of the Dutch there. Everyone else here, Ashanti, Messina, Segu, Karta, Sokoto even, all conquerable. Sokoto might be the biggest threat in the area, but they're still weak. They're still technologically backwards. You'll crush them. It's very possible as France to just fight like 10 wars here and gain all this within 40 years. It's amazing. Outside of that, you can do what the French did semi-historically. You can conquer Vietnam. You can invade Siam in this area. If you really want to cause problems for the British, you want to invade Burma early on, because if you gain these lands, the East India Company struggles to complete its journal entry and will absolutely collapse with its mutiny event later, making it free land. Or you go for the big prize and you invade China. Wait till they get the opium problem. Once they get that offense-defense penalty, by all means invade. If you can, take Beijing as your first prize. It absolutely kills the Chinese. They just collapse. They don't have the government, they don't have the military, and they've lost their richest state. From there, you can easily conquer the Chinese. France, interestingly enough, has decent cultural tolerance. It's very easy as France to get to multiculturalism, as well as total separation early on in the game. Promote your intelligentsia, research a couple society, and you can be fully tolerant France and just take over China, and you'll run it better than the Chinese will, because you got better tech. Be aware, though, these provinces are huge in terms of population, so swallowing them from a bureaucracy standpoint is painful. On the other hand, if you swap to colonial exploitation and you don't incorporate them, you get all these bonuses, reducing their output and their wages, and you still control the lands. Downside is you can't build an industry there. Just think of it that way, though. But you can easily conquer them. In terms of Europe, it's a little bit harder. Austria, Prussia tend to intervene on wars. If you want to avoid that, just you're France. You're supposed to be diplomatic. You can improve relations with everybody and still have some influence. Go slow. Don't go fast in Europe, at least until you're ready to take on the whole world. Belgium falls pretty quickly, and if you do it right, no one really cares what happens to Belgium. I hate to say it, but the Netherlands hate them. Great Britain, right now, is a trade agreement. They tend to lose it. Afterwards, the Netherlands, though, look weak, but I find they tend to get support from the British or even the Prussians. Prussia is a problem, but if you can break Prussia or the Netherlands or even Great Britain, if you're crazy, Europe's easily vulnerable for your conquests. Algeria here, I will say you already have this. Just constantly, as France, be launching diplomatic plays to conquer lands. Just raise one regiment of your army. You've got 100 troops, raise the 61, deploy it on the border. They'll give up. You can take Algeria quickly, colonize from the north. Sokoto falls. You can even, if you want to, go down here and invade the Zulu, Transvaal, and Orange, which if you want gold is great, then colonize through here. Right here is worth pointing out, I already set this up, Kenya. If you colonize this early and gain these two areas of colony, you'll cut off all European powers from the East Coast outside of Portugal, which really doesn't colonize, giving you all this free reign to colonize and conquer as well. Up here, Ethiopia, all of this is super vulnerable to conquest. Right now, France is probably the best conquering nation in the game. It's stronger than Great Britain. It's hilarious. So, let's move on now and talk about the French building stuff. So, France right now has a bit of a crisis with your bureaucracy. So, let's work on how do you fix that. I recommend first off, double check your laws, make sure anything isn't screwed up. Right here, it's kind of weird that you've got this division in your military. Fix that. Make sure all your laws are refined, because you'll find that a lot of them aren't. Just improve all that. You've got weird stuff that's all messed up here. Like some of your ports are anchorage, some are cargo ports. Change that. Be aware that you're going to have issues with clippers and stuff. Construction, you're already iron framed, so just be aware costs are going to skyrocket. Build at least one, maybe two. If you build two, your economy will have trouble, but you'll build a lot faster. Once you do that, and this is something I don't usually recommend, build one or two government centers. You want to get rid of that 10% tax waste sooner rather than later. And then afterwards, you're going to want to start building up the Rhone region here. Alsace-Lorraine has iron as well as coal bonuses right here and here. It's really up to you where you prioritize. Strasbourg up here, more iron mines. Lyon down here has more coal mines. Iron up there, coal down here. Tools, you have a tool workshop. I always forget where this one is. Somewhere down, there, you've got a tool workshop. You can improve this. One slight thing to note, Paris here has no peasants left. So outside of building the government admin centers, don't put your industry in Paris. This is probably the only nation in the game I say don't put your industry in your capital. This will grow over time, the population. If you get lucky, you get a migration. But otherwise, you'll cripple yourself if you improve Paris too much. Focus elsewhere. You've got a lot of population outside of Paris. Outside of that, though, you don't have too many other amazing areas to focus. Put your naval industry in Marseille just for the bonus there. Iron, coal, tools. That's how you build up. Iron mines, coal mines, tool workshops. If you focus on that, you keep your construction costs low, you'll build up. Now, France, unlike many nations, first off, you can't centralize in Paris. It's impossible, basically. France already has a good industry set up, meaning one thing it's probably worth doing early on is just going through and filling out all your natural resources. You don't have many in France, unlike a large nation like the US, meaning you can do this in the first 5 years. Fill in all your natural resources, go through, make sure you got the automatic construction on. If at some point you have spare construction capacity, it's not wasted. And then just build up. You will be able to conquer a lot of lands, build power, but the reality is France is already in a great place. AI France is the best nation in the game currently. I sure hope they add journal entries to make it worse, but the reality is you don't have any troubles as France. It sounds so strange to say, but you don't have any troubles. You've got good laws, good liberalism. You've already got voting broken in there, so you can strip more rights from your landholders. Your ruler is an industrialist, meaning he's not part of your landholders, making it so much easier to reform your law. You've already got political parties. You can easily reform your stuff however you want it. It's super easy to get rid of the monarchy as France. You don't need to. You can if you want to. Really, there's no problems as France. It's probably the easiest nation right now to play in some ways. And I wish I could give you more interesting stuff about France, but that's about it. Make sure you get rubber down here. Consider invading the Middle East to get access to oil late game. So let's pull up the oil. Do we have oil up here already? Or maybe we don't because we haven't unlocked it yet. But if you do, you'll see that Middle East has oil. If you want to invade somewhere else, Venezuela will have oil late game. You could theoretically even invade the Hudson Bay area because you can beat Great Britain at land. Be aware though, Great Britain can beat you at sea. You have a great flotilla. Might be the only nation in the game I might say build and research some naval tech. If you smash the British Navy, I can keep smashing them. It's super easy to seize their colonies. Britain's army is half or less than the size of yours, and after the first 20 years, all their colonies and Dominion's army, with the slight exception of the East India Company, are totally useless. There's no one in the game that could really stop France right now. US might have a shot given time, Prussia as well. Austria falls pretty easily as well. Have fun. You can go on to dominate a lot of areas. You don't have any unique formations. Become a monarchy, become a republic, do whatever you want. It's pretty much as France. It is a sandbox game. Be aware, and I will point this out, there's a couple last little tips here. You own a province in India, Pondicherry. This is where you're going to get access to dye early on, so it is worth improving this because your textile industries desperately need dye at some point. You control nothing in this area right now. You can colonize Sulawesi. If you get a trade port in India and China, try to get one that allows you to build opium, or try and get an opium territory, which are mainly up here, unfortunately. If you can get opium, then your army's that much stronger. Win a war against the British East India Company in Britain, seize Calcutta. As long as you've got a good navy, you can easily wreck people with the dye plantations. If you want, you could go to get the Suez quickly, because you can start with that decision. Be aware, don't take it immediately. That 1,000 will kill you. Get the Suez, then you can invade and conquer Egypt. Once you've conquered Egypt, everything down here is for your taking. I played a game as France. I think with the small exception of Cape Colony and Portugal's lands, I owned the rest of Africa. I think there was like Liberia I left alive, and that was it. Super easy, super fast. Just keep an eye on your infamy. Fighting all the natives can skyrocket it. For some reason, people don't like you when you conquer small nations in Africa, even in Europe. The last thing you need is a cut down to size war, but everybody likes you, really. no one hates you, and you're strong. Yeah. In terms of your starting tech, it really is up to you. I would definitely go for quinine pharmaceuticals. Quinine, get rid of the malaria bonuses, improve your steel. The only thing France does lack a little bit, and it's not huge, is you don't have the world's greatest arms industry. If you're constantly fighting, you're going to want to improve it. The costs are high, and they'll only get higher as you fight more wars. So anyway, go, have fun, conquer stuff, enjoy France. If they improve it, I will redo this guide and make it more interesting. But in the meantime, if it was helpful, probably wasn't, do leave a comment, like, subscribe, check out my Discord, all that great stuff. Recommend another guide for me. Why not? And I will see you guys all in another guide, video, let's play, live stream, etc. Bye for now.